So every year there is a spike of discussion about top programming languages, best programming languages somewhere near the new year. And I decided today to give my perspective on this area and tell you what I think the best or top programming languages for landing a job. Let's go. Hello everyone, my name is Dmitry and I'm a software engineer, and recently I decided to start my YouTube channel, and this is my very first video. In this video I decided to give my opinion on the topic of top programming languages, best programming languages, etc. So first of all, there is no best programming language. There is no silver bullet. All the programming languages has its pros and cons, and you usually have to pick the tool by the task. So there is different languages, and some of them has strong sides in some particular areas, and some of them bad for this area. So you always should consider the task. But anyway, for example, if you're only starting and you're completely lost among all the programming languages you can learn, I will try to show you my perspective on this topic. And I'm gonna pick the most popular programming languages, and I'm gonna check the demand of the programming languages in terms of jobs, and I'm gonna check the amount of developers. So that means we are gonna check if there is oversaturated languages, or if there is an area where you can jump on and land a job. So let's see. So to pick the languages, I decided to go on the TIOBE index. I hope I pronounced it right. TIOBE index. It's a website which aggregates the information about the most popular programming languages in the world. So I picked several of them from the top 10 and excluded the very specific and niche ones, and pick only general purpose programming languages. So that's my list. It's a C, Java, Python, C++, C#, JavaScript, PHP, Go, Ruby, and I pick one specific language, but it's pretty popular. It's Swift. It's iOS and macOS programming language. So the next thing I've done is I went to linkedin.com. It's job-specific social media where tons of job listings and programmers, and I search for amount of people and for amount of jobs. I tried to do it worldwide, but it's very generic, and there is too many people. And also LinkedIn doesn't allow you to search by the jobs without specifying any area. So I picked the 5 cities. It's pretty random cities. It's just my opinion. The tech industry is developed pretty good there. So it's Seattle in the United States, Vancouver in Canada, Singapore, Berlin in Germany, and London, UK. So I'm showing you the whole process so you can go and do it yourself and check your own location, or even remote location if you wish, work remotely. So after I picked the cities, I went and searched for each programming language by people and by jobs, and got a number of how many people on each position you have for every programming language. So why I choose this method? I think it's very important when you are learning programming, especially if you are a beginner and you're only starting to look for your first job. It's very important to have less competition. It's going to be much easier for you to land a job if there's not so many people knowing this technology. So after I did this search, I just created a very simple scoring system for each language. So the top 1 programming language by the amount of jobs available and less developers in this area is Ruby. It's pretty surprising because Ruby is not so popular language, but apparently the amount of people who know the language even less. Top 2 is Python. It's pretty expected. The language had recently huge increase of popularity, and there's tons of companies which starting new products on the Python. The next one is C#, and then 4th one is Java, and the 5th one is JavaScript. Also, I noticed a few more things while I've been doing this research. First of all, the PHP is the worst programming language, at least among the languages I picked for. research, it's the worst programming language in terms of amount of people and companies who are willing to hire you for PHP developer, because there's too many people who knows PHP apparently, because it's pretty old language and had its popularity before, and it seems there is not so many companies who still writing code in PHP. I also noticed that languages vary from location to location. For example, C# is pretty good language to learn in Seattle, because apparently the Microsoft office is there and C# is known as a Microsoft language. Also, I was surprised, but C++ and Swift are not so great. There's too many developers and too less jobs. And also, this research is pretty interesting because I realized how different and how hard it could be in some cities to find a job, and it's going to be much easier in other locations. For example, in Seattle, it's much easier to find a job because there's like 7 or 8 developers on the position, and it's going to be pretty hard in Singapore, for example, where it's like 20 people on the position. So let's discuss each language. We have a first one, Ruby. What does it mean if it's the first one? Is it the best programming language? I wasn't sure so much about this, because there is another thing which pretty important is popularity on the languages, and especially how if it's increasing or decreasing during the years. Because for Ruby, I think the best days behind, because it was a pretty good language on the start, especially with the inventing Ruby on Rails, and now it's not. If you check the Google Trends or Stack Overflow questions, you will see the popularity of Ruby is decreasing. So that means it can happen in the future that this language are gonna die. It's not gonna be dead completely, because there's a tons of legacy code, but if you want to work on bleeding edge, it could be not the best language for you. Also, another thing about Ruby, it's pretty locked to Ruby on Rails, because I'm sure most of the jobs you can find, they all are Ruby on Rails. And if you, for example, don't like this framework, it's going to be hard to find something else. The next language is Python. I think Python is a pretty good language to pick, especially as your first language. It's pretty easy to learn. It's general purpose language. It uses in a lot of industries, including pretty popular and high salary industries, machine learning and artificial intelligence. It could be used on the web. It could be used on even on Internet of Things. There is a lot of usage for Python. Also, a huge scientific area that's using Python as well. In my personal opinion, it should be language number 1 that you consider for learning. Also, the popularity of Python is constantly increasing. It's one of the fast increasing in popularity languages for the last 5 years. So it means there will be more and more companies that starting to work with this language. The next one is C#. I think C# is pretty solid option. It doesn't have really increasing in popularity or decreasing. It's kind of staying the same. And also C# has several areas which it's very popular in. It's gaming industry. So for example, if you want to work in gaming industry, it's pretty solid choice, and sometimes even the only one. And also it has a Microsoft environment such as .NET framework for web development, and it's pretty solid in general purpose. I think it's pretty good choice. So number 4 is Java. Java was one of the most popular languages for years, but right now I think it's kind of found its niche. It's mostly used in enterprise, in big companies, in banks, in finance, and if that's the thing you want to do, to work for enterprise company, to work on complex big systems, Java is the way to go. It's pretty solid choice. I don't think there is will be decreasing in popularity of Java in the, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years in the future. But you should understand, usually small startups or more like hipster companies, they don't use Java. It's more the thing of the big companies. And the 5th language is JavaScript, and JavaScript is super popular, especially recent years. It has so many developers, so much great communities. You can use JavaScript for front end, you can use it for back end. There is a lot of machine learning with JavaScript and a lot of stuff. and the only reason it's on the 5th place in my top is because there's so many developers who learning JavaScript. A lot of people who has its main language learning JavaScript just to do the front end if they work as a full stack developers, for example. So JavaScript is pretty good. It's not going anywhere. It's stay here. It's increasing its popularity, and it's pretty solid choice. But I think here you need to pick the way where to go. It's probably going to be either backend or front-end JavaScript. And front-end is much more popular. I think you can find a job pretty easily on front-end. Back-end is going to be harder. There is a Node.js and other options for learning as a back-end JavaScript developer, but it's still pretty good choice. Another thing I should mention about PHP, it's lost by all parameters I had in my research. It's decreasing dramatically in popularity. It has the worst ratio of the amount of the jobs and developers. But I think PHP is pretty good language if you wanna do freelance. For example, if you go to some freelance platforms like Upwork or Fiverr, you can find so many freelance jobs there on PHP. The reason is because people who go into freelance, they usually have some simple websites, for example on WordPress, which is written in PHP, and they want something simple to fix. So if you're considering freelance, maybe you can consider PHP as your option as well, but I still would have picked up the different language. Another thing I should mention, and a lot of people, especially beginners, probably researching this, is the high-paying programming languages. And I think there is no such thing as a high-paying programming languages or less-paying programming languages, because software engineers is usually paid by the grades, by the experience, how many years you're in the industry, how good you at what you're doing, so how good a programmer you are. Also location and also the company. So for example, if we pick the fun companies, the big ones, the Apple, Alphabet, which is Google, Netflix, Amazon, etc., there's going to be much higher salary, especially in the United States, for basically any developer. And if you pick the smaller startups, there's going to be less salary. So that's all I had to say, and I hope you like this video. I hope it give you some ideas on how to pick programming languages, and you can do the research by your own. Sorry of any mistakes, because it's my very first video, and I hope you enjoyed it. And don't forget to smash this like button and subscribe on my channel if you want to see more. And see you in the next one.